based on the conversations tonight, I think we have a wonderful board that is going to do an expedient job with the search committee. Hopefully the timelines that I have suggested would be similarly followed, but at no point would it be more than a 10-month period. So my vote for Mike is for the interim. I think he is well suited for that position, and I think Commissioner Latvallo's motion is well taken on that. But please do not let it reflect that I am excluding anyone else from becoming the permanent person, because I don't think that that is what the vote is asking for, and that is not what I am voting on tonight. I'm simply voting for a 10-month contract with the ability to terminate within 30 days, and hopefully, I do think we need to talk about a search committee tonight, but I will leave that for another motion.
In the interest of continuity, the interest of where we're at right now in terms of our position, I would echo what Ms. Mallow said about what we are voting on right now. I'm very carefully compartmentalizing in my head the difference between what we're voting on in terms of the interim versus hiring for the permanent position. I think it is two totally different things that obviously are not mutually exclusive, but with regards to the interim, given the time proximity to budget, to all of like the important decisions that need to be made, I would support Mr. McCurrick.
That echoes pretty much exactly what I would say. Both candidates are dear friends of mine, and I hope they remain dear friends of mine. The main difference is, number one, it's interim, and number two, Mr. McCurrick was most recently on our board and most recently is up to speed with JWB currently today at this moment. With that said, I hope that all of the best candidates apply for the permanent position that will be opening, and that we have the very best of Pinellas County, Tampa Bay, and the United States to choose from, because this is a very worthwhile agency. But with that said, my vote for the interim CEO is Mike McCurrick.
I would echo what my last three colleagues said and support Mike.
I have a question that needs to be clarified, Judge, if I could. Elise Minkoff, I thought, would not be interested in the interim, because if she did, she would have to leave the position that she currently has with the Housing Authority.
Apparently not.
So
apparently she had conversations with Mr. Brickfield, who is supporting this, and if it's for 10 months or less, then it's not a problem. It becomes a problem if it lasts a little bit longer, and they'll have to figure something out.
okay.
Yeah. I did speak with Neil as well, and he was in full support and couldn't speak highly for her for this opportunity.
Okay. Initially, I was leaning towards Karen Bowe just because I thought that she's well-known within the organization. She's got the experience, and she's the closest thing to the quick replacement for Beth I would think that we could have. However, I'm a little concerned when I heard you guys talking about the 2 vacant positions that we haven't had to fill, so then now we're going to create another one. And I only say that because it's just the way it will result. I certainly don't want that in reflection on Karen. I think Karen is qualified to do the job, and in a lot of respects would be a perfect candidate for it. But voting right now, I think I'd probably say I'd have to vote for Elise Minkoff.
I would definitely repeat everybody else saying, save time. I'm with Mike McCurrick.
And that leaves me, both candidates are well qualified, and this is for a seamless transition, and I need to make this very clear because I like both of them. For a seamless transition, I think that I would vote for Mike McCurrick, but I don't want to discourage not even Karen and or Elise for applying for the job, because truth be told, Elise was approached for the position before, and she did not throw her name in the hat, because at that time in her life, she was not ready for it, but she is ready for it now. And so I just want everybody to keep that in mind.
Madam Chair, I move to authorize the attorney Flynn to negotiate, or to enter, and the chair, let me start over. I move to authorize Madam Chair and Attorney Flynn to finalize a contract with Mr. McCurack to be the, we want to call him interim or acting CEO? Does anybody have a preference?
Interim.
Interim CEO, for a term not to exceed 10 months with a 30-day option to terminate at JWB's option, and compensation to be consistent with the compensation paid currently to our current administrator, CEO Beth Houghton.
Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I have a question on the contract.
Yes, go right
The only
ahead.
thing we didn't, I didn't see addressed in there, maybe I missed it. We do provide vehicle compensation to Ms. Houghton. This job does require that person to travel quite a bit. So I don't know if we need to consider putting that back in there, or maybe I missed it in the contract.
So what I put in this contract, which is a bit different, you're right, is under page 6 benefits, that the person who obtained this position would get reimbursement for business-related expenses and mileage under the JWB policies and the personnel policies. We can change that. Ms. Houghton didn't get it under the policies. She got a car allowance. So she was outside of the personnel policies when it came to vehicle reimbursement. Sabi is sitting here. I think the IRS rate is 70 cents a mile these days. Perhaps, Robbie, do you know?
I think that's a little bit high, but I don't know for sure.
Julia's shaking her head, but that we would pay at the IRS reimbursement rate. That's what's set forth in the JWB policies. So we could change it. We could do auto allowance or under the personnel policies.
Okay, I'm good either way. I just want to make sure we addressed it and that we took care of that, because it does require a good bit of travel.
Yes, it's under section 6, and if you guys want to look at section 6, that also talks about the paid leave available. And if you would want any changes to that section, please let me know.
I have a question about, just clarification point. Ms. Malo earlier was asking you to remove the bylaws.
Correct.
And
In the
and then
wherefore.
you made a mention about the duties section also. You're not removing it from the duties section, right?
Correct, because unless
Okay.
the board directs me otherwise,
'Cause the duties are in the bylaws. I just wanted to make sure.
Correct. So the duties are in the bylaws, so that is under section 1. We are just not appointing pursuant to the bylaws, which was Ms. Malo's distinction.
Right.
Because at the end, it talks about appointing pursuant to it. But if, I am assuming that the appointment for the interim, that they have all of the same duties and responsibilities that Beth has, as well as the full authority that she has with respect to signature authority under the board policies, and that there's no limitation.
Perfect. So I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That was a lot of conversation. So now. Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Now that we've made a decision on that, I wanted to echo your comments on that. I think Elise is very competent and would be very capable as our CEO, and I would love to see her apply. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
And I think she will. Next, we're to item D is the approval.
Judge, before you move
I
on,
just
could
skipped
I,
right over C.
could I ask the board, are you asking me to also have staff put this on the June 12th agenda for the search committee? What is there was no motion made to that. That was
Do you guys
Sarah's
want to talk
third
about the search
motion.
committee now, or you want to wait till June?
We have a budget hearing that day, so if I'm not here, I can't be on.
We can appoint you in absentia.
That means we can appoint you because
Is
you're
there a
not here.
requirement to chair the board to be in person? That could be done.
No, those meetings would still have to be in person under the Sunshine Law. So everybody who would volunteer to be on the search committee, you'd have to understand that you would have to come in person. We would need a
Yes.
quorum of the search committee. Last time we did this, we had 8 of our 11 board members who wanted to be on the search committee. So we had to have 5 every time we had to have a meeting. So it is an obligation obligation. It's hard to get you all together, so please bear that in mind if you'd like to be on the search committee, if that's what the board would like to do.
I will be honored to chair it if I can pick the members.
So I would make I would,
My first two draft picks are our public defender as well as Mr. Onks.
I was gonna make a motion on the open agenda, but it appears that it's happening now. So I would make a motion to appoint Commissioner Latvala as the chairman of the search committee. That is the motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
I didn't even have to ask for a second.
Any discussion? No?
Because
Great.
any discussion, since we're going down this roadway.
Timing.
Go ahead, Ms. Chair.
Oh, no, I don't have discussion.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Commissioner, you make sure you get that scheduled together, and I got a lot of people that I can see that might want to be on your committee.
I would just like to throw my hat in the ring to be on that committee.
So how about we bring it to the June meeting to appoint the rest of your committee at the June meeting? We can set the dates.
Yes.
Right, he can work with me to provide
We're
dates.
not bringing something back in July, though.
It's your
That wasn't
committee.
part of
It's your committee, Chair.
That wasn't part of your-
See, in
We'll see.
June, you're gonna get the
Oh,
rest of
Indian
your
wrestling.
committee,
Right.
and then,
I gotta approve your budget and.
That's why it's July.
So Commissioner, we can work with you to get dates, and then at the June meeting, we can put forth those dates, and then we can see who else would like to join your search committee.
thank you very much. So now we're at the appointment to fill the vacancy on the Juvenile Welfare Board Finance Committee, and that is done by me, and I do believe we do have a candidate, and I do believe Mr. Hendrick has agreed to fill the position. Yes, ma'am, go right ahead, Ms. Chia.
I'd like to also throw my hat in the ring to participate in this, since I'm new, I wasn't able to get on the, I'm throwing my hat in the ring, communication.
Yes. Anybody else? We have Mr. Hendricks, we have Ms. Chia. Do we have room for two?
Bylaws, we
pursuant
only
to
have the
bylaws?
one.
So now we gotta vote again.
We have to vote. So
Okay.
you can take a motion and then a second as to the candidate and then vote on that.
We want to do a straw poll again, or? So do we have a motion? Mr. Onks, I see your red light. Go
I was
right
just
ahead.
gonna ask, can we approve Mr. Hendrick and then say Ms. Chia gets the next spot, the next opening?
What about an alternate?
Well, we don't, our bylaws don't provide for an alternate. Our bylaws provide a set number of spots, and then Judge Moore is on all the committees as the board chair, as ex officio. She does not vote. We have a 5-member finance committee. But bear in mind that this is only filling Mr. McCurrick's spot until September 30th of this year, which is when you will then have to reappoint the entire finance committee, because this is a year for elections of the board as well as finance and executive. So this is only for 4 months and 2 weeks.
So it's not a forever.
Correct.
Can I make a motion that we appoint Mr. Hendrick this time with the understanding that Ms. Chia will be appointed in September? Or is that not allowed?
The way the bylaws work is in September, you guys have to vote and put your slate forth on then, but we can all
We can put her
remember
on the
that Ms.
slate.
Chia would be very
Yeah.
happy to be a candidate
Yeah.
in September. We just don't have a provision for that in the bylaws, Commissioner.
And the fact that she wants to serve on a committee is great, and hopefully she'll feel that way after she goes to a couple of the side meetings.
Right.
But is that a motion, Commissioner Latvala?
Sure.
Do I have a second? Let's have conversation. Ms. Chia, is there anything you want us to know?
So as point of conversation, I'd just like to understand what we're voting on, because
Right.
if we're appointing her to the finance
Right, we
committee,
really
then.
can't.
No.
No.
In September.
We can, right now, the motion needs to only be appointing someone to fill the
Fill Mr.
vacancy
McCurrick's
for
spot.
Mr. McCurrick's spot till September 30th.
Got
And then
it.
at the September board meeting, you guys will appoint
will
the
appoint
5
the next.
members of the committee, as well as you will have a new chair you will be appointing at that point too, a new vice chair, and
So the
September is our
motion
time.
I feel like Mr. Bartlett now. The motion is to appoint Mr. Hendricks for the interim? Or back to interim? Yes, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're kind of losing our focus here. We're
Yeah,
jumping
second.
all over the, coming with all new stuff. We're like leaving every bylaw and
Right.
bye-bye, and just, this sounds good, we're gonna do it. That's not, I'm a little nervous about that, so I don't see how we can promise a position for September.
Correct, we cannot.
We gotta
Can't.
just
You-
go ahead
you-
and,
You
The
can't.
motion is only to appoint someone to fill Mr. McCurrick's spot through the end of September of this year.
Not yet.
Chris.
I think Chris,
make a motion to appoint Mr. Hendry.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Whew, you guys are making me work today. Next, I gotta put the glasses on. This is a motion to approve the appointment of the Juvenile Welfare Board Representative to the Pinellas County Licensing Board for the Children's Center and Family Daycare Homes. And I do think that we did have a candidate as Ms. Kristen Nage. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Whew, next, thank you, Jesus. We're at the approval of proposed personnel policy revisions by Ms. Flynn, who has worked a lot today as well.
Okay. Thank you. At your places is an amended memo. So at the request of one of the board members that we take a look at a couple of the items in our personnel policies. Ms. Houghton and I did that. We worked through those and we made a few other just cleanup changes for legal issues. There was a federal act called the Pump Act that has gone into effect with certain regulations. And so there was cleanup to the proposed change. One was to change the engagement to the Engagement Council because JWB had already changed that name. The proposed change 2 was cleanup language to be in compliance with the Pump Act. And proposed change 3 goes to the screening requirements, background checks, reporting requirements for JWB employees. And so now we have something that Commissioner Latvala suggested because the Pinellas County Attorney's Office has it, that employees at a certain level would be required to report arrests of their spouse or domestic partner. And that would only be people at the chief level, not all JWB employees. Therefore, we then moved down to the suspension section and cleaned up a bit of language there. And we also made some changes to have reporting requirements where if someone would be arrested who is a JWB employee or if a chief level their spouse, that it would come to HR, the CEO, as well as myself, so that everybody would be in the know and we could, collectively decide the best way to handle it. And other than that, there were no other changes to the personnel policies other than some cleanup language to make certain that everything flowed and was in compliance with the law.
I move to accept the policy change.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much for that. Next, we have the approval for the recommendations of the compensation and classification study for the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County. Mr. Robbie Stivers.
She is here, thank you. Just to introduce the item, by JWB policy, it is policy that JWB conducts a comprehensive compensation and classification study and adopt the recommendations from that. Those recommendations are broken down into 2 parts. There was an external market assessment and an internal equity assessment. The request that'll be before you, and Ms. Crumpler will give an overview presentation of the report. But just keep in mind that the request is to implement an updated salary structure, and that's the pay ranges within our salary structure. And then the second one is to align positions and salaries with the new adopted structure that she's going to be going over. So if you will welcome Ms. Allie Crumpler. She is a senior consultant for Evergreen Solutions.
Good afternoon. So as mentioned, my name is Allie Crumpler, a senior consultant with Evergreen Solutions, and we're very excited to present the results of our classification and compensation study to you all today. So just a quick overview of what we'll discuss today. So we'll talk about the study goals. So why do a classification and compensation study? We'll talk about the internal and external review or the analysis that Evergreen has completed as a part of our study. We'll talk about the subsequent recommendations that Evergreen is making as a result of that analysis. We'll discuss next steps for JWB in conjunction with Evergreen, and then I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. So why do a classification and compensation study? I'm sure you're all well aware that your greatest asset are your employees, and we want to make sure that you're in a position to recruit and retain your top tier talent. So as a part of this study, we completed an internal review, which involved reviewing your current classification and compensation system to check your internal equity. For that, we completed an assessment of current conditions, or an AOCC, an employee outreach phase, and a job assessment tool, and we'll talk about each of those in more detail shortly. We also completed an external review, which involved surveying peer organizations to check your external equity, or to see if you were paying positions competitively within your market. And then based on those two analyses, we produced recommendations to provide JWB with a system that would be equitable both internally and externally moving forward. So starting with our internal review, we completed our assessment of current conditions, and the AOCC really allows Evergreen to get an understanding of the current status of your classification and compensation system, assess any strengths and weaknesses of that system, and really provides the baseline for our recommendations moving forward. So we completed this analysis with employee data that we received from your HR leadership team back in August of last year. And taking a look at the compensation plan that is currently in place, you do implement one salary schedule with 20 pay grades. And overall, this salary schedule is well organized and consistent in design. So each pay grade within your schedule has a 65% range spread. So a range spread is the distance from your minimum starting salary to your maximum earning salary, or really the earning potential for that pay grade. So each one is a consistent 65%. And then you do have consistent midpoint progressions of 6%. So a midpoint progression is the distance from the midpoint of one pay grade to the midpoint of the next pay grade. And that just allows for equitable earning potential across all grades. So again, well organized and consistent in design. This plan does support 58 classifications or positions, and overall supports roughly 77 employees at the time the data was collected. So if we take a look at looking at employee tenure for those employees that were included in this snapshot. So the overall average tenure for employees with JWB is roughly 6.4 years. So you're starting to get some longer tenured folks within your organization. But if we break it down into quartiles, so breaking those pay ranges into 4 equal parts and looking at the tenure between those quartiles. So average tenure for quartiles 1 and 2, so the first half of your pay ranges, is roughly 3.2 years. Average tenure for the second half of your pay ranges, so quartiles 3 and 4, roughly 8.7 years. So this does indicate that you have filled several positions over the last 3 to 4 years. In discussions with your HR leadership team, those primarily have been due to attrition. So taking it even further and looking at employee distributions within those ranges, we did note that roughly 81% of your employees are concentrated in the second and third quartiles of his or her pay ranges. So they're clustered right around the midpoint of your salary ranges. And this is likely due to applying a cost of living adjustment equally to both an employee's salary and to the range, so employees are staying at the same relative positions. This also suggests to us that you may be hiring employees in closer to the midpoint. That's likely either due to market demand, so having to offer more competitive salaries to keep in line with your market, but also being able to recruit quality employees that are likely coming in with education and experience above minimum qualifications. Taking a look at compression, we did note minimal compression between employees and their direct supervisors. HR best practice does recommend that employees make less than 80% of their direct supervisor's salary, which is what we noted in the majority of cases for your employees. So very minimal compression in that respect. We did note that employee salaries are higher than what the models would predict. So if we took looking at where an employee's salary is in relation to where the model would expect based on tenure, the majority of your employees are more than 10% above where we would expect them to be. Again, data only tells us one side of the story. Likely that is due to your focus of hiring quality employees that have those advanced levels of experience, education, hiring those employees that can hit the ground running and are well qualified. The next part of our internal review was the employee outreach phase. So we did have members of our team that were able to come on site and do some in-person and virtual focus groups with your employees. I believe that was January of this year. And at that time, we also released an anonymous online outreach survey, which elicited 65 survey responses. So we did ask employees why they came to work for JWB as well as why they remain working here. The majority of employees shared that they enjoy making an impact on their local community. Many of them share that they feel that they're making a positive impact by working here, and they enjoy the type of work that they do. Not surprisingly, most of them enjoy the compensation and benefits and retirement package that is offered by JWB. Employees do feel that they have job security and stability by working here. And then many employees shared that they enjoy their peer relationships, so not only with their coworkers, but with their direct supervisors as well. When asked about areas of concern, employees did share that they feel that cost of living adjustments have not kept up with inflation or the local market, as is common with your area. Employees feel that pay ranges should be wider to offer increased earning potential and growth. Several staff members noted that they feel that staff count does not align with current workload, so would like that to be reviewed. And then, but overall, satisfaction with current compensation was a 6.5 out of 10, with 1 being the lowest level of satisfaction and 10 being the highest level. And I will say that 6.5 is a pretty positive response for that question. Typically, we see less than 5 when we're surveying other organizations. So. Overall, top employee considerations or what they would like to see addressed as a result of this study would be adjusting compensation to be competitive with your local market, reviewing that workload distribution for your positions across the organization. They're requesting a staffing study to make sure that you have adequate staffing levels for your positions within the organization, and then to provide additional career or advancement opportunities for your positions. As part of our internal review, we also completed a job assessment tool, or a JAT, and this is really our version of a desk audit. So as much as we would like to come and sit with all of your employees and see what they're performing when they come to work every day, unfortunately, that's just not feasible for us. So this tool helps us to capture that information. So I did want to note that JWB had almost a 100% participation rate for the JAT, which is phenomenal. So your JAT specifically was open for about 6 weeks. So employees had 4 weeks to complete their assessments, and then supervisors were given 2 weeks to review those submissions. So employee completion rate was roughly 92%, and then of those, 95% of them were reviewed by supervisors. So we felt like we got good data on your positions. And as a result of that analysis, we found that your position titles generally reflect the role and type of work that's being performed, so not many recommendations in terms of title changes. And also we found that the current hierarchy of your classifications and levels appear to be consistent with the scope and size of your organization. So while there's a few tweaks that we might suggest in terms of your overall pay range and how positions are slotted within that internal hierarchy, the majority of your positions are in a great spot. For that analysis, we did score each position on a compensatory factor system. The 6 factors that we scored them on are listed there. So those are management, processes, resources, technology, errors and risks, and knowledge and experience. The next phase of our study was an external review where we surveyed peer organizations. We do this to check that competitive compensation. So we're comparing your positions with your market peers, and I want to stress here that we are comparing your pay ranges to that of your market peers, not individual employee salaries. So we're looking at those published pay ranges for each position, not what an individual would make within those positions. This analysis allows us to identify and address any inconsistencies or disparities in your pay across those similar positions. And for that analysis, we are looking at the roles and responsibilities of the position, not just the title, since it may be called something different in another area. I also wanted to note that all of our market data is adjusted for cost of living. Because some of your peers may be located in other areas and it may cost something different to live in those areas. So we do align all of that market data for the cost of living within Pinellas County. These are the peers that we solicited information from. So you can see that there are 11 peers here, and then we also solicited data from our secondary source data from the Economic Research Institute, which collects information from the private sector just to maintain a check on that. These peers were selected as ones that are either close in proximity to JWB or may have a similar size, structure, or offerings to that of your organization. To provide some additional data on that market analysis, so as you can see, we received information from all of the peers that we solicited data from. We did look at 55 of your classifications or positions, and we received good data from 48 of them, so roughly 87%. 7 of your positions we did receive limited matches on, so we would consider limited matches to be less than 5, so we don't consider that to be statistically significant, or if it has more than a 40% differential. So although we're comparing roles and responsibilities, if it has either so 40% differential, it's either 40% above your pay range or it's 40% below, there's something else about the position, or they're valuing it in a way that we're not aware of. So we would consider that not to be significant. But of those the 48 positions that we did receive good data on, we received total quality matches of over 350. And our average match count for your positions was roughly 6.9. So taking a look at that market analysis, and where your positions fell, or your pay ranges for your positions fell in relation to your market peers. So if we look at it in percentiles, thinking about it in terms of a bell curve, so the 50th percentile would put you right in the middle of that bell curve. So half of your peers would be paying less than you, half of your peers would be paying more than you. You can see that at that 50th percentile, your minimum salary ranges in comparison with the minimum salary ranges for your market peers, you're actually in a pretty good spot. So you're at those minimum starting salaries, you're roughly 4.6% above that of your market peers. If we push it to the midpoint, so the middle of your pay ranges are roughly 0.2% above, or roughly right at market. But if we push it to the maximum earning salaries for your pay ranges, you're roughly 1.8% below. So you can see the survey average range, so again, that range spread for your peers on average was roughly 86.8%. So if you recall, I mentioned that yours are a consistent 65%. So what that says is that you have less earning potential for your positions on average than that of your market peers. So this is why you're losing ground as you go from the minimum to the maximum. So you're more competitive with those minimum starting salaries, but you're losing that competitive edge as you go through your salary ranges. So if we look at the 60th percentile, making you a little bit more competitive in terms of your market peers, you can see how that shifts. So now your minimum starting salaries are roughly 0.5% behind that of your market peers. You would be roughly 3.6% behind at the midpoint, or the middle of your pay ranges, and roughly 6.5% behind at the maximums. And then you can see with the 75th percentile, it would push you even further along that bell curve to make you a little bit more competitive. You would have to adjust your plans even more to maintain that competitive edge. Overall, the majority of your classifications were found to be greater than 10% above market. So the majority of your classifications are in a good place in terms of those pay ranges. However, there were some classifications or positions within IT, leadership, finance, and administrative support that did fall behind your peer averages by greater than 10%, and we would recommend some adjustments within the pay plan to maintain that competitive edge for those positions. So as a result, our recommendations that we're making, implement an updated pay plan that's going to be updated for that market competitiveness, and then assign all classifications to pay grades based on that internal and external equity analysis. We would recommend that JWB implement the new plan using a bring to minimum approach, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. I know you all already do this, but we would continue to recommend that JWB conduct annual small-scale market surveys. So as positions, you experience turnover or positions that are hard to fill, just maintaining a check on that market analysis, making sure that no further adjustments to pay grades would be needed. And then also continue to conduct a classification and compensation study, as we're doing here, every 3 to 5 years as those market conditions are warranted and as your budget allows. Finally, we would recommend that JWB review compensation guidelines annually and revise those as needed. Those guidelines would include, policies for bringing in new hires to the organization, policies for promoting employees internally into a new position, or moving employees through those existing pay ranges. So this is the proposed updated pay plan. So again, very similar to the plan that you already implement. It does include 20 pay grades with an expanded range spread. So we took your range spread from 65% to 70% to make you a little bit more competitive in terms of earning potential in relation to your market peers. And then we do have a standard midpoint progression of 6% for each pay grade. There are a couple of exceptions to that. So going from grade 101 to 102, there is a larger midpoint progression increase, primarily to support structural placement beyond a part-time role. So grade 101 is, the majority of those are going to be your part-time roles. And so we wanted to allow some additional room for growth beyond those part-time roles. And then grades 119 and 120 do have a higher progression to support your more complex roles within your organization. So the next step is to talk about how we would move employees into that new plan. So in conversations with your leadership team, Evergreen would recommend a bring to minimum approach, which is exactly as it sounds. So we would make sure that every employee is at least at the new minimum of the pay grade. Since your employees are already well placed within your organization, according to the data that we received, and that the majority of your positions already well aligned with your current market standpoint, we would recommend that bring to new minimum approach. And then we would, stress that your HR team continue to further review any employees or positions individually for any adjustments that may be necessary based on time, performance, or isolated areas of compression. So you can see that the estimated salary only cost for this is listed there, and there is an asterisk for employees because it's listing 5 employees that would be adjusted. But these employees are actually, it's not employees, it's positions, and these are actually vacant positions. So that estimated cost would be what it would take to bring those positions to the new minimum of the pay grade before hiring in a replacement. Otherwise, next steps for Evergreen in conjunction with JWB would be to finalize updates to your job description utilizing JAT information. So if you recall, I mentioned that JAT collected information on the roles and responsibilities of each position within your organization. So we are in the process of updating all of your job descriptions to make sure that they are accurately capturing that. And any questions for me?
I have a few, actually. So my first one is, what do you use as comparative classifications for the market peers?
So for that, we're looking at the roles and responsibilities of your position, and then we're matching to comparative roles within your peer organizations. So we're looking at job descriptions and we're making those comparisons to, what an accountant in your organization does in comparison to those market peers.
Who are the market peers?
So those are listed on slide 8. Let's see, let me go back here.
Okay, yes, sorry. So this is the market peers that you use that analysis on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. When you do the compensation comparative, do you use total compensation including benefits and perks?
So we're looking at base salaries only.
Thank you. That's all, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Rutland.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the new interim CEO make this decision.
I believe this is a board decision. It's not the CEO's decision.
We can't,
The board sets the salary bands for the employees.
we can't delegate that responsibility.
It's never been done before because based on the bylaws, that falls typically within the budgeting process, the compensation, because that goes to how much money you're spending on salaries. It's not executing the policy of the board.
Okay, thank you. I'll withdraw it then.
Any more questions or comments? Go ahead, Ms. Sandra.
The 5 positions that you mentioned, are those the only salaries that would be adjusted as a result of this?
Yes, so in that bring to new minimum approach, those would be the 5 that we would recommend adjusting. And then, as I mentioned, just, encouraging your HR staff to continue to review those, all of your employees for individual adjustments based on, performance, education, or other areas of compression as necessary.
Thank you.
So there was one position that has, in this year, expanded opportunity or expanded responsibilities added to the current position that is requiring a minimum adjustment of roughly $3,000 in addition to the vacant positions that you spoke of.
My question on that is that's annually, right? $3,000
Yes, ma'am.
increase, thank you.
Any more questions before I ask for a motion? Do I have a motion?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we do have the approval of the Ilios allocation increase by Ms. Bogus. Ms.
Yeah, yes. Good afternoon again. I'm going to read the recommended action, approve Elios allocation increase. Personal enrichment through mental health services, many of you may have known them as PEMS, is now doing business as Elios. And they have been a family services initiative, and we call it and refer to it as FSI, so you'll see that in the memo. System navigation provider since FSI program inception. The Elios FSI teams have been operating out of the Mid-County Palm Way campus owned by Elios. On May 30th, 2024, the Palm Way campus was sold. And while the new owner allowed Elios community programs to continue operating on the Largo campus, but only temporarily. And they were notified formally in November of 2024 that they would need to vacate the campus in 2025. So in anticipation of this move, they did some internal analysis and also looked at a number of properties. And when searching for a new building, Elios prioritized accessibility, specifically maintaining a presence in Mid-Pinellas County with access to major bus lines, because they do see program participants on site. And so the move requires a total fiscal year 25 allocation increase of $73,416.90. And then in future years, as in the board memo, there are continued allocation increases. I open it up for any questions.
Ooh, I'm seeing the light. Any questions or comments? Ms. Malo, go right ahead.
Motion for approval.
A second.
All in favor? Any opposed? You're wearing them down, Ms. Bogus, you're wearing them down. Go ahead with your next
Conditioned on it
presentation.
going back to the name of PEMS.
Yes.
I second that.
Okay, the next item I have, and I'll read the recommended action, is to approve budget amendment to St. Petersburg Free Clinic for $172,887 to purchase, store, and distribute pre- and post-disaster supplies. So back in October of 2024, this board approved $500,000 after our storms that we had here to help with the hurricane relief. We spent approximately a little over $327,000 of those dollars to respond to needs of our programs and our community at the time. Lessons learned. We, really feel that it is important to prepare and have supplies for the community prior to the storm. And so St. Petersburg Free Clinic and Shayna Ben, who's their Chief Operations Officer, is here this afternoon. Well, I think you're still here. Okay. She's here. They purchase, they store, and they help distribute to the community. So they have agreed that they could do this for us and help to get to our funded agencies like our neighborhood family centers, as well as Elios would be another location where they see children and families on site and can respond immediately to their needs. And so what we learned from last time is in some cases, Pre-storm, it would be good to get those items to those centers and to those locations, and in some cases, post-storm. If after the hurricane season, we do not have a hurricane or any kind of disaster, those supplies will go into the community to children and families that have needs. We're also, in the memo, you will see that we're suggesting that in future budgets, fiscal year '26, that we allocate $150,000 for next year, that we can look at this time of year to see if, again, we would want to allocate it to St. P. Free Clinic or another agency that could, again, purchase, store, and help distribute to the community. I open up for any questions.
Move approval?
Do I have, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Bogus. We're moving down to our presentations. We do have the FY '26 interim strategic plan by Ms. Helton.
What we had anticipated, going back, say, 2 years, is that because this year, fiscal year '25, is the 5th year in a 5-year strategic plan, that during this year, starting in September and October, last September and October, we would be conducting a strategic planning process for the upcoming, probably 5 years. Well, given the storms and really the tail, not just of the immediate time, but the tail of all of the things that needed to be done, both internally and for our funded agencies and for families, we deferred that strategic planning process, kind of kicked it down the road 1 year. I believe it's been the sense of this board that they would like to have the new permanent CEO as part of the next process, so that their voice would be part of the process. They aren't just handed a strategic plan and say, go forth and implement. But again, that's a board decision. So because we're coming up to October 1st, a new fiscal year, and we have finished or largely finished a 5-year strategic plan, the intention is not to just then sit on our hands and not move forward. But because we have not been able to do a full-blown assessment of community needs, including futurist work that this board wanted us to do, and obviously interviewing every board member at least once, doing focus groups in the community, analyzing census and other related data from the school system, for instance, and other sources to bring that to bear for the board to propose and to approve the next permanent strategic plan. Because we're not doing all of those things, it doesn't make sense to just whip together a 5-year strategic plan without really good thought. The strategic plan, the primary part that the board plays is on what those strategic pillars are going to be. So, for instance, last time we did this, we added 0 to 3 as an area of emphasis. We learn more, we assess what the community needs more, what other organizations are either stepping up or stepping away from. And all of those things matter in setting those strategic pillars. Because we're not going through that full-fledged process, it is our recommendation that the strategic pillars remain the same. They are what you have approved and are still necessary. But that we're not going to just stop and say, well, we did everything we said we were going to do in our documentation for the last 5 years, but rather Jomar Lopez, who works with us in a whole variety of ways, is an employee, but does strategic research and has been tracking our progress on the strategic plan, talked through a number of, I think all of our managers, a number of our other employees, to find out within their sphere, you know, underneath the strategic pillar and then underneath the strategy, what did they recommend and intend to continue to do underneath those things, so that, you know, there's some clarity regarding what our goals are next year underneath the strategic plan. And so a number of things were added. A lot of things were taken away. You have probably seen those, just that spreadsheet from hell that shows every single action, not only the strategy, not only the strategic area, but the strategy and then the tasks, which we keep track of. Those aren't outcomes, but we want to make sure if we said we needed to do 1, 2, and 3 in order to be successful in delivering on that strategic plan, that we in fact did 1, 2, and 3 and on a schedule. So we have come back with what is in a memo. It is not within your, you know, your materials. And we can bring back whatever, in whatever form you would like to see. But what I would tell you is the strategy, which is owned by the board, will not change, or that's our recommendation to you, is that it not change. But to let you know that we've looked at the strategies underneath that, and especially the tasks underneath that, which were never part of board approval. The strategy at this level is absolutely board approval. So we're not asking for action at this point, but rather we do want feedback on that. As I said, the strategies would all remain the same, but there are natural next actions that our staff and our managers are going to take, and in some cases have already begun to take. You know, once you learn more about an area, you realize that sometimes that the task you thought was going to be valuable isn't, and you don't do it. But moreover, tasks that as you get to year 3, year 4, year 5, you realize next steps are a raft of different tasks, all again in support of the strategic plan as approved by the board. So again, I'm not presenting that as for action, but would entertain any commentary on that or feedback on that, so that helps us direct our work going forward. Yeah.
Can you remind me on the strategic plan, do our bylaws call for a certain, you know, update every 5 years or 6 years?
I don't believe so, no.
So we're not operating under any obligation, okay. And we've entered into a contract, right, for a consultant for the strategic plan?
Well, if we do what I suggest, and we're staying with the strategic plan at the highest level, we had engaged a futurist firm, Toffler, as well as Mary Grace Duffy and Barbara Morrison Rodriguez to do a lot of the local work. Both of them, you know, Barbara was an employee, she will now be a consultant, but they do they do the work when we ask them to do the work. So it's not, it's hourly and as directed, primarily by the CEO, but in response to what the board may want to see. So we would kind of put all of that on hold for at least one more year so that it would be meaningful for you all and that we're not wasting money to do that kind of community-wide work to be inserted into the next strategic plan.
Yeah, so I would be supportive of putting it on hold, pending, the search for the permanent. I do think engaging the board, now and over the coming months with Mr. McCurrack on, there's, maybe the high level, like what are the pillars, like what are the pillars of the strategic plan we're looking for? Cause I think there will be some interest on updating those based on things that have worked and maybe changing priorities or changing, challenges in the community. So I think we could spend this time with Mr. McCurrack, probably going through maybe the high level, like the pillars or foundational elements, and then, the permanent person would be able to fill those in. But that would be my thought, is certainly to take our time and kind of maybe put a lot of the heavy lifting, other than conceptualizing with the board what the foundations are, probably on hold. That would be my preference.
Chief?
Yeah, I would agree with Ms. Strunks as well. I think it's extremely important that the new permanent CEO is part of that strategic plan, because it's what they have to carry out, right? So it's gonna be their job to carry that plan out. So it's really important to me that we move forward with this and put it on hold and wait for we get that permanent CEO in place, who then can become part of that strategic plan that we're gonna build as a board with our CEO, who understands what we're asking for and what we're building, and then they can carry that out. That's their marching orders. They carry that strategic plan out going forward.
And this is just for a presentation, so there's nothing to vote on tonight, but Ms. Houghton just wanted to keep us informed.
That's true. Okay. Thank you.
The next presentation is the JWB Program Monitoring Recommendation Funding Changes for the FY26 year, and that's Ms. Boges and I think Mr. Stivers. Oh, and Ms. Peel, we have a threesome.
Back again, okay. Let's see if I can break this. So I will be presenting with Robbie Stivers, our Chief Financial Officer, and Laura Peel, our Chief Information Officer, discussing today JWB's monitoring of our funded programs that occurs annually, as well as our recommendations for funding changes for our fiscal year 26 budget. The processes we will talk about and review with you today drives programmatic and fiscal accountability. We will review our annual program and financial monitoring, our emphasis on data quality and evaluation of our programs, a tiered monitoring assessment process that we put in place this year, our progressive discipline process, as well as our program reviews that we do and recommendations. We thought this chart was important to show over the last 10 years our program growth. Back in 2015, we were funding around 74 programs, and today we fund around 100 programs. You're gonna see fluctuation in between. Sometimes it's a slight fluctuation, sometimes it's a greater fluctuation. Usually in the years that there's a greater fluctuation, it's because we did a larger procurement. So like back in 2016, we did a procurement for new and expanded programs. And we did, just in 2022, we did a procurement for new strategically aligned programs. And as you can see, in 2020, we did, started our new strategic plan. We thought this next chart was also important to show the growth of our investment, specifically in children and family programs. This is not JWB's total budget, but this is specifically for our funded programs. We, back in 2015, we were a little over 44 million, and now we're over 118 million. So internally here, we talk a lot about the three-legged stool approach. We have 3 units: program administration, program evaluation, and program finance, that really are assigned, each of a staff is assigned to a funded program. And over the years, we've realized that even though each of these have distinct functions, roles, and responsibilities in terms of monitoring programs, working collectively and collaboratively together internally is really important. And so we have put in place our three-legged stool. On this slide, we're showing all the different types of activities that we do to monitor programs throughout the year. This includes the three-legged stool working on all of these. I promise you I won't go over all of them. I just want to highlight a few of them. One is participant file reviews. So we take samples, data of participant information from either our system Flex, where programs enter in, or whether they upload that data to us. And we go out to do on-site file reviews, where we're ensuring that the data is of quality, that it is accurate. We're also looking for length of stay in a program, the dosage, the quality of the service delivery. We're reviewing case notes to see how a participant is progressing or not progressing in services. Another one is program observations. We go out, sometimes they're planned visits, sometimes they're not planned visits, where we're seeing the program in action and understanding the interaction between the staff that we're funding and the children or adults that are participating in that program. We also have monthly and quarterly provider meetings. So depending on the level of technical assistance or support that a program may need, we typically would do quarterly meetings. If they need more, we do monthly meetings. And in these meetings, the three-legged stool is meeting with the provider, going over their data, going over their financial information, going over any and all information about service delivery. All of this feeds into two important pieces of documents: our tiered monitoring assessment, which I will get to in a little bit, and our program monitoring reports. Each year, in July this year, you will all receive a packet of each program. It's a one-page snapshot of how our program did the previous year. We evaluate all of our programs. We develop program outcomes. We approve validated and reliable tools for measurement. We review service levels. So that is the number of participants in a program at any given year. We complete data analysis on all our program outcomes. We observe program for service delivery, fidelity to the model. We require programs to submit to us a program methodology, and that's what we're checking to ensure that they're adhering to the service delivery they put forth and we funded. We provide research, trends, and best practices. I'm going to hand it over to Robbie for finance.
Thank you, Karen. So the three-legged stool, each leg has to work for the other one to really work. And this is about, in the spirit of the theme of this discussion, transparency, as well as contract compliance, as well as accountability. And this part of this particular leg, I guess is the way to say it, is monthly reimbursements reviews. So this is where the cash goes out the door. And certain documentation is required to come in to reimburse agencies for their expenditures. And this is an extremely important part of the process, and it disperses and reimburses roughly $118 million of the $160 million that we're going to talk about later today. So there's a lot of emphasis on this. I'd like to recognize Stacy Gill behind me, if you'll just raise your hand, Stacy. Stacy and her group, Braxton may be here and others, they do an outstanding job to make sure that we've got the documentation, is compliant with the contract and all the other outcomes and deliverables that are associated with it. Operating cost review, we'll talk later about the agency submitting a budget, and that is vetted to make sure that there are allowable costs that are associated with the program that line up with the program from the standpoint of how many people, it's a service, so how many people and employees, what kind of salary ranges are paid, and certain operating expenses that come through there. So that's really key to this process. Expenses incurred, as well as the appropriate categories of reimbursements that'll be made. So we look at all that. And then there's the annual piece of this, and each of our agencies go through an annual audit, just like JWB does. And there's certain criteria that the audit will look at to make sure that they're being compliant and operating per their policies and procedures and all the other things that we do here at JWB, very similar. We review and approve that budget. We also review and approve budget amendments. Sometimes we have to come back to the board to reallocate money for them if there are unknowns or unforeseens that come through. Lastly, we look at their policies and procedures, and then we do testing on the samples that they send in, whether it's for compensation and benefit reimbursements or certain operating expenses. We'll go through and test those samples to make sure that we're paying on actual costs that they're incurring. So very important part of the leg. That's my part of this presentation, but I'm glad to answer any questions, or I'll turn it over to my colleague, Laura Peel.
Okay. Good afternoon. So data, how it's collected and how it's analyzed fits into this perfectly and is used for the program monitoring. We collect a lot of information in our systems, and I just want to briefly go over each one of those. So we collect information on the individual participants in our programs, which includes their demographics, their household information, those kind of things. We also collect the services. So this is the services that the programs provide, and we track what participants receive, what services, so we can track the numbers served, the dosages, and the length of stay in the program. We also track outcomes, which is a contractual metric that determines if a programmer and its participants are meeting its intended goals. And then finally, we collect all of the information on budgets and reimbursements that Robbie just spoke about. So we have two main systems that we collect data in. This one was mentioned earlier. The first one is Flex. And in the Flex system, we collect most of our programmatic data from our programs and all of the financial data from our programs, the budgets and the reimbursements. We found it to be adaptable, easy to use, and it has built-in automatic checks and controls and workflows that have already begun to improve data quality across the board. It also has data views that are allowing us to look at data in different ways. So as I mentioned, not all of our programs use Flex to give us the programmatic data. We have a system that we call Direct Data Uploads, or DDU, that approximately 25 of our programs give us data in that manner. And basically, if the agency already has their own data system, rather than doing dual data entry, we give them a prescribed way that we want the data, and then they upload it directly to us, so they don't have to enter into Flex. But a lot of the information, well, all the information is pretty much the same. And by putting data accountability in the forefront of what we did, I just want to give you an example. This past year, we really tightened what we were doing with direct data uploads and really set into place an automatic check on all the rules to make sure that the data is in good quality and it's timely and it's accurate. And it's really been working for us so far. This fiscal year, every one of our programs have delivered the data on time, which has not necessarily happened in the past. So we're finding that we give them quick feedback, and that's been super helpful. And then finally, as you recall, back in December, we went into contract with a company called Star 76 to do what we call our Data Warehouse 2.0. Basically, we were taking our 10-year-old database, rebuilding it, and then putting it up into the Azure cloud. Data Warehouse is an analytical database that houses all that information that I just spoke about, plus a lot more. It provides dashboards, real-time data, and can be used to get more timely look at how our programs are doing. So this project is also well underway and doing well, and we're very excited about it. Any questions? Yes.
No questions. I just wanted to make a comment that I did speak with Beth about this agenda item in detail, given my background and what I do, and I was very excited to hear the level of auditing and oversight that your areas have on the people who receive grants from us. So I appreciate that. It is kind of near and dear to my heart. So thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to hand it back to Karen.
Thank you. So next up is the tiered monitoring assessment. And you should all have at your seat, I know it's small print, I apologize, but this is just a snapshot of all that we just discussed. So programmatic, administrative, financial information, all the work that the staff do here. They score each of these areas, and then there's an overall score at the end. And this was really to help us when we reached 100 programs. How do we, providing the level of support and technical assistance, not every program needs the same. So this process has helped us categorize the program. So they get scored in one of 4 categories, complementary being the highest, meaning that they're performing really well, their contract is in full compliance, and all of that. The next level is classic. Then the concentrated, those are programs that need additional support and technical assistance. They are struggling in one way or another. Or they're a very new program, and when a new program is initially funded, sometimes they need a lot of support as they onboard. And finally, corrective action is the last category. The progressive discipline process. So that is something that is in board policy, specifically for performance improvement plans and corrective action plans. This year, we added a letter of noncompliance to that process internally. So we send out a letter if an agency is not in compliance. And I'll give an example. If they're late on their data 2 months in a row, they would get that letter saying you're late on your data, you need to get into compliance. If they do not, if they're successful in doing that, great. If not, we can move them into a performance improvement plan or corrective action plan. Of course, at any time in the year, if something egregious happens or severe, we can either move straight to corrective action or recommend for termination. Next up, so all of this leads to our program review process. We take all of this information in. As part of the strategic planning, the schedule that was put out earlier before we had to delay it, in the spring of this year, we were doing a program review process. So we do it every year, but we do a deeper dive when we're going into a strategic planning year. What happened here, so all this information and what we decide for programs is one of 4 things. We either maintain as is, we potentially recommend to expand, recommend a reduction, or recommend non-renewal. So this leads to fiscal year 26 recommended changes. And I just want to thank the staff. They put a lot of time and effort into this process. It was very planful and thoughtful. And so I just want to go over, and you should all have at your seats again a handout of this. These are recommendations. They're not here for action today, but what they are is part of the budget process. So whatever feedback you have, please share so we know how to proceed forward. All of the agencies that are on this document have been discussed about their recommendations and are aware, so this is not a surprise to them. The first area I would like to go over is the reductions. These are due to significant lapse that has occurred over, say, the last 2 years. So Healthy Start Coalition of Pinellas, the Empower program, was a newer program that we funded 2.5 years ago. They had a subcontract for Champions for Children that was not meeting expectations for several reasons. And so what we are able to do is to recommend expanding doula services, which is under that contract, but also reduce the contract by a little over $85,000. The next one is the Pinellas County Sheriff's Police Athletic League. This is a community out-of-school time program. They provide after-school and summer programming year-round. Again, they're right-sizing due to lapse. The next one is our Club Childcare. It's their Community Pride Healthy Early Learning Program. It's an early learning center that serves children, infants through 5-year-olds. Again, they are being reduced a little over $82,000 due to lapse. The next one is Summer Bridge Wrap Pool. So the school system provides Summer Bridge for 4 weeks during the summer, typically from 8 to 1 o'clock. And what we provide is before care, after care, care on Fridays. as well as during the weeks that the school system's summer bridge is not occurring. So we have been seeing lapse in this area, so we are recommending reducing it by a little over 323,000. The next one is Young Men's Christians Association of Suncoast. We call it YMCA of Suncoast. It's their middle school academy. Again, this is a before and after school program. Due to lapse, we are recommending a reduction. As well as YMCA of Suncoast Promise Time program. This is a before and after school program in elementary schools. And due to lapse, we're recommending a reduction. The next are non-renewals, Family Resources, Intensive Care Management, Elementary Truancy Specialist Program. And let me say this, this program and another program I'm going to discuss, we work very collaboratively with the school district. We met with their leadership in terms of this program and another one later on. This program, the case manager was co-located. It was one position, co-located at 3 elementary schools, working to help reduce truancy for students that attend those schools. We feel that this program, there's a more efficient way that we could be doing this. The administration of a contract that was nearly $80,000 for one position just didn't seem to make sense anymore. So looking at some of our other navigation providers and programs that we fund that work with the schools, looking at potentially creating some efficiency there. The next one is the Florida Department of Health, our health department, our Pinellas School-Based Sealant Program. Back in 2015, we started funding this program. This goes to Title I schools all throughout the year, helping do dental exams on students and providing sealants for them. And we feel that this may not be an area where JWB would, looking at its investment and saying, is this the best investment that we can be making? I know that this would be a reduction in, Dr. Cho explained that it would be a reduction in kids being able to have this service, but the service wouldn't go away completely. The next one is Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services, their teen parent engagement program. This program was not able to meet expectations and serve the numbers that they had initially put forth to us. It wasn't that the staff weren't trying. I think we have multiple things happening in our community, lower birth rates. We have families, young families, moving out of this community for affordability, as well as, and we have other programs that provide a similar service and have capacity and certainly serve teens. So again, this is why we're recommending not renewing that contract. The next one is Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services Violence Prevention Program. This program we have been funding for many, many, many years. I think I've been here since 2005. It may be before I was even here that we were funding this program. I think that this program has evolved over the years. What it does is it provides a staff person at 10 middle schools. They provide in-classroom instruction up to 13 weeks, 50-minute lessons on violence prevention, and then they do some small subgroups. JWB staff is recommending that if we were to continue to do violence prevention programming, we look at best practices and models on this and how it's done outside the school day and in the community, especially because for our special act, we shouldn't be funding any services that may, look like, I would say, instruction in schools. The next one, Gulf Coast Legal Services, Family Legal Support Services. This contract has been lapsing for the last 2 years, a significant amount of money. And also, it's just been an overall challenge for the provider and for us. In speaking with the CEO, She said, this is our most challenging contract that we have. What we're suggesting here is that we not renew this contract, but then add 50,000 allocation to both our two domestic violence contracts with the Haven, Hope Villages of America, the Haven, and CASA, Family Justice Center, so they can get legal services for their program participants in the best way possible for their programming. The next is Our Club Childcare, Reed Strong Pinellas, back in fiscal year 2020. This program was initiated right before the pandemic. At the time, it was for both outreach as well as book distribution and connecting families to literacy services. And there is now a number of book distributions, providers and programs that are happening in our community. And so we wanted to eliminate duplication. And again, this is one that we may want to look, not this program, but in the future, intervention services for literacy. You know, how can we help our youth be more proficient in reading? And then the next one is the University of South Florida Board of Trustees, USF Family Study Center, 0 to 3 co-parenting initiative. Again, this was a newer program that we had funded 2.5 years ago. They are just not meeting expectations. Again, I would like to say it's not because the provider isn't trying, but again, I think sometimes when we fund newer programs and we give it a try, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so we are recommending not renewing that one. And the final one is a partial year we're recommending funding for Directions for Living, Family Works program. They help families get rapidly rehoused. This was not a program that we had been funding. Last year in January, due to a crisis in our community of trying to get families rehoused, we funded this program. And so we are recommending a partial year contract to help those families that are currently in that program get rehoused, and then not renew for March 2026 after that. So this is about a little over a $3.8 million reduction. I would just like to say that, you know, this is part of the work that we do. I know that these are tough decisions that we have to make, and these are our recommendations for fiscal year 26. So I open up for questions.
Any questions? And again, these are not action items, these are just informational items. Go right ahead, Ms. Chia.
I was wondering if on this previous document, is it possible for you to put together a heat map for the board to present it in that fashion rather than this fashion? Are you familiar with heat map?
Yes.
Okay. I think, or in conjunction with it, this is good detail, but I think it would just be easier to see it at a glance.
Of where each of the programs lands, in which category. Okay, absolutely.
Chief?
Yeah, so obviously the defunded programs that we're not renewing, it appears that all those are because of lack of participation for the most part. So the lapse issues, is that also from lack of participation? Is that what is causing the lapse? Like we're just losing students, and maybe Superintendent Hendricks could
I think
talk on that, because I understand that even the school system is losing students at this point.
Well, I think it's a mixture. Sometimes it's staff turnover that's happening. Sometimes it's less participants in the program. It could be a mixture of a number of things.
Yeah, just from a pure numbers standpoint, I think this was discussed maybe about a year ago in here, but Pinellas County has fewer and fewer children that live in Pinellas County. So birth rates have gone from about 9,000 children in our hospitals every year to about 7,000 in our hospitals every year. So we've been graduating 7,500 students, and we have 5,800 kindergartners. So play that out year after year. That is not unique to this public school system. There's no more students in charters today than there were 10 years ago, and vouchers haven't moved that either. It's simply fewer children, and so if there's fewer children, there's going to be less students needing wrap care and those types of things, particularly when a lot of the ones that are leaving, it's because of housing costs.
Any more questions or comments? Thank you very much, Ms. Bogus.
Thank you.
This takes us to Mr. Stivers and the FY26 budget forecast scenarios.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a preamble to this discussion, I tried to think of something clever to lighten the mood in here. It's going to be hard to rival Commissioner LaPala, but I'm going to try. I even consulted my AI platform, and the best it could come up with was an Excel spreadsheet joke, so I'm not even going to go there. So we'll jump into this and get started. So, and I've got the clicker. The purpose of this is, this is a presentation. The board will have the opportunity in July to approve a preliminary budget with the final approval of the budget in September. So be mindful of that as we begin to flow through this. We're seeking for guidance, advice, recommendations based on program allocations, and I've got a pointer here that will give us some perspective on a couple of days after this meeting next week. We're going to be sending agency letters out, and those letters will give them instructions on how to build their budget. Part of building their budget is knowing what allocations that they can expect subject to board's final approval. And part of that is we will have to note a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, in their budgets. So we are recommending, suggesting a 3% COLA. The current CPI that came out just a couple of days ago for last month, April, was about 2.3%. That has a lot of things in there like gas, food, and things like that. We also have state data that shows this county is one of the more expensive counties to live in. So be mindful of that as we go through. And then we want guidance on just the preparation of the FY26 budget. So we're in 25, obviously. We're forecasting 6 months out, 9 months out, and these are forecasts. This is based on what we know today. We want to understand the impact of today's decisions on tomorrow's and next year's budgets. It has been the inference of this board that we want to spend today's dollars on today's children. So this is part of that. Lastly, strategically and proactively identify and address any long-term imbalances. There are 2 or 3 things in here that we're going to talk about that are required by board policy, especially maintaining a restricted fund balance. And what does that mean? It means that we have reserves that are adequate to meet unknowns and unforeseens or even interruptions of revenue. JWB as a special district, as most of you all know, is different than that of a municipality. And really the primary difference from a CFO perspective is we've got primarily one income stream, and that's based on property assessed values and the tax that we generate from that. We've got a small income stream on how we invest that money through the state's investment pool. And we get a return on it. There's about $3 million or so of revenue that we get. And beyond that, there are no other revenues for us. So be mindful of that as we go through. The timeline is really important. And as you can see, we're right in there. This is a presentation. It's a follow-up from the starting budget that we mentioned last month. And last month was just a starting place for this, and we've since have revised. The next time you're going to see this budget is in the June meeting. In the June meeting, we'd like to see the gaps get narrow and more narrow and get closer and closer to a final budget. So we make our presentation in July, we've got a firm budget to move forward to September for the final approval. Another reminder, these letters need to go out to the agency, so there are some sense of urgency to get some guidance, especially on the COLAs as we move through. And you can see the other key dates there on the screen. This is really important, the assumption timeline of when we get feedback for property assessed values. The first we got in March, and that came from the state. That's 5.6%. That's what we know today. And that's how we began to build this budget. We will, in the next couple of weeks, get an estimate from Pinellas County. And finally, in the first part of July, we'll get the final certified value. So what does that mean? So we're at 5.6. We've got the first preliminary estimate from the state. That can move up and down. And it may move 3% either way. I'm guessing that it might be on the little bit of a low end. We may see a little bit better increment from that as we move forward. But I don't know that for a fact, and we'll know more soon. You will hear more about that at the June meeting. We've asked to do 3 different scenarios. The first scenario that we gave in April, and that was to keep the millage rate as we know it today at 0.8250. That means don't change it. And that millage rate is adequate to fund a lot of the things that we're already funding, including the COLAs, including fully funding, finishing out our strategic plan for this year. Well, actually, the interim for the next 2 years as well. And what we decide today, or as we build the budget today, and we'll decide at a future date, as I mentioned, will largely affect how we are able to fund the initiatives of our interim strategic plan, our new strategic plan. We also do, for those that are new in the room, we do a capital grant one time a year. Last year, it was around $4 million. We had some extra money that we could spend down there. Going forward, it'll depend on what our millage rate is and what we can afford to do. This helps our agencies not use operating dollars, but use dollars that are specifically granted to improve their facility, to make it more attractive, to make it compliant, to do all the things, put in playgrounds, buy buses, those kinds of things. The reduced millage rate is the 0.8029. And there's really no magic to that number. We were asked to look at a rollback scenario in scenario 3. I took the current millage rate and the scenario 3 and I split it in half. And I just wanted to see what that looked like. And it seems to be a good compromise, a good middle ground solution that I want to talk to you further about as we get into this. Questions on that? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'll just add that this morning we had a commission workshop. Part of it was on the budget. And our latest estimates that we've received are at 4%.
4%.
But we'll know more, of course, after June 1st.
Sure. And I've had some conversation too, Commissioner, I appreciate your comment with the county, just trying to get some guidance on what they're seeing and so forth. And they can't give me much guidance at this point on what the property assessor's office is doing. So I just don't know what that'll look like. Forecast changes. Okay, this is since the last time this board saw the budget, and that was in our last meeting about 30 days ago. And I want to talk about before, as another preamble to you, it's worth what you pay for it, and that is we have a lot of unknowns right now, both at the federal level and certainly at the state level. And the state's still struggling to pass their budget. Hopefully they can figure that out sooner than later. We're looking at tomorrow's inflation, what that looks like, what the tariffs impacts will have positively or negatively, or what specifically our agencies will be encountering and how they'll be affected by it. And a lot of them do get federal funds. We know that. Hurricanes, that'll be another thing, or other kinds of weather events that we'll have to deal with. Hopefully it wasn't an anomaly last year. I keep being told that. It's my first year in the county. And this is all I know. So my look going forward may look different from your all's, but I've been told they never hit here. But I've seen 2 now, so I don't know what that's about. And then the assessed value for FY26, we'll know more as we've just talked about that. I have the best information that I have, and that's an inflation rate of 5.6%. That's what we built the budgets on. And then finally, we need to be thoughtful about the new strategic plan as we get into this. As you all are aware, that there is oversight, there is compliance, there is accountability to what we do in order to monitor the outcomes of these contracts and make sure that we are representing the people that pay the taxes as public fund. I take as a great responsibility, and I know this board does too. But we got to have people to do it. So if our programs are going to increase, then the inverse of that is we need to have the staffing to do it. If our programs are shrinking, then we can obviously have some shrinking staff to do that. And we'll have some scenarios in here that we can look at that. So there was a decrease in the, get my pointer here, in the admin costs since you all saw it about $300,000. And those decreases are really discussed there, one of which we reduced the COLA from 3.8% down to 3%. With a new 4% number, we may revisit that if that's the board's direction that you want to provide. We've also decreased positions, 1.5 positions, due to some of the program reductions, some of the program non-renewals that Karen and Laura went over, myself. And be mindful that while there are non-renewals and other programs, the interim plan is going to ramp that up some too. So, and there's also wind down periods. You just don't stop one day and say, hey, we're done. There's a wind down period. In this case, it's about 6 months. And then there is an initiation period to get a program up and running and stabilized and stuff. So there is work either way. And then the interim strategic plan has those new activities that Ms. Houghton told us about. The COLAs for programs, the program reductions we just talked about, and then there's some others. We did that really just to balance out the reductions overall. It's about $3.5 million. New and expanded programs, be mindful of this. As we get into the interim strategic plan and the new strategic plan, in the past, we've been able to spend almost $4 million or so for the last strategic plan per year on average. In this particular budget, it is being scaled back to about $2.2 million. So there are effects to reduced millage scenarios, or even going back to a rollback scenario, which we'll talk about. Questions there? All right, this is a really good graph that I want to recognize staff so I don't forget, like I do every time. The finance group that's here, that's helped us work, everybody, please raise your hand, be recognized, because they are really innovative, do a great job to help us put this stuff together. When I started about a year ago, so I'm a pro now, so just ask me anything, there was consternation that we had too much fund balance. So I began to look at it, and board policy requires that we keep about 25%, or keep 25% of our expenses in a restricted account. We weren't showing that appropriately, and we've since changed that, but as you can see, the blue chart, that's 26 that we're looking at there. And in the solid part at the bottom is roughly $110 million, and that's the money that we operate on. That's how we fund our agencies. Those are the monies that we use in order to operate and do the things that we do as an organization. The next column up is the restricted fund balance. That's about $32 million. That's 25% of our expenses that we put aside for unforeseens. We put aside for reserves for interruptions in funding and other initiatives that the board may want to do that we have available. The unassigned fund balance is a small amount above there. And this board was very clear that we needed to be real frugal of how we spend money from the standpoint of being able to meet our commitments, but not having an abundance of reserves on hand in unrestricted, unassigned fund balance. In other words, just cash sitting there that's not doing anybody any good. So there's a real trajectory as we've been able to spend this thing down in a compliant but reasonable way. Look at the out years on the reduced scenario, and this is on the point 829 scenario. That unassigned fund balance begins to squeeze. That means we've got less and less and less available if we have hiccups and those kinds of things. We still have restricted funds, but when you get into that, that's a different level of reserves that you want to use in those situations. So we can talk a lot about this, but that's kind of a quick overview of that. Any questions?
Robbie, I just wanted to say great job as you discussed our, real clear intent on making sure that we were cutting down on lapse. Basically, what we were trying to do was cut down on lapse. And the way you all did that was you figured out what wasn't working. And that was the presentation that Karen, and you and Laura just gave. So great job on that. It's not that we're cutting programs or we're doing less. It's that we're doing what works and we're cutting what doesn't. So I really appreciate you all doing that. And obviously, it's been successful, and it frees up money that can be used for things that actually are helping this year's kids, which is what we're trying to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
From a risk perspective, risk assessment perspective, as that reserve gets really, really thin margin, what is the remedy if in a budget year something were to happen that were to exceed that? And now, we're kind of in this space. I'm not sure, can we run on a deficit, or what's the remedy if that were to happen?
Don't want to run on a deficit, especially when I'm CFO. But this middle bar here, this is the restricted, that board purview. And we dipped into that some after the hurricanes last year. So we have that available, and that is required by board policy. The number we're managing to is the unassigned number, meaning that that's just vacant, non-committed cash that's sitting around that needs to be used. So we want to manage that frugally, and we've done that. And you can see, as Trustee Onyx talks about here, it has a good trajectory in every year of being tighter and tighter. I don't want to run out of that, though. I don't want to get it to it's uncomfortably low.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you.
You're welcome. Revenue and fund balance considerations. Fund balance is the same thing as restricted reserves, unassigned reserves, savings account. It's just a kind of a fancy accounting term that's put to it. And we have decreased our lapse over the years. And for those that are new in the room, lapse is money that we have budget, or an agency has budgeted but wasn't able to spend. And maybe they had vacant positions they couldn't fill. Maybe they had interruptions during the hurricanes, but they're money that just didn't get spent. And newer agencies will have more lapse than more mature agencies. Some agencies can't get the participants, as Trustee Hendrick mentioned, with lower participants that are in the programs and stuff. So we're monitoring that. Karen's group particularly are monitoring that all the time to make sure that that money that once we appropriate it, once this board approves those contracts that go out, that money gets spent for the good of the community. So in this case, as you can see, we're here, and we've actually exceeded our revenue or our lapse target from prior year. And so we're spending it down at a faster rate. We want to keep an eye on that. We use that, as I'll show you in just a minute, in our budget. We count on some of that so it gets spin up, so it just doesn't sit there. And as you can see, in out years, it got pretty high. So that gets back to Trustee Zonk's comments about keeping the money working like it's supposed to. Funding parameters. And based on the millage rate, and this is the reduced millage rate, this isn't the rollback rate. Here are some of the things that you will see as we get into the budget format and show you under the interim strategic plan. Under this scenario, we can allocate about $488,000 to new and expanded programs. Those are the new initiatives that'll be under that strategic plan that Ms. Houghton was talking about that we want to do. They're new activities under existing agencies and existing programs we have, and there could be some deviation to that. $428,000 of that is for FY27 new and expanded programs to complete the implementation of the interim strategic plan. Remember, in 28 is when we'll roll out the formal strategic plan after the board approves it, and then we'll have a real firm direction of how to move forward. The FY28 through FY32, the average is going to be less than what we've been able to spend in previous years, so I've mentioned that. Administrative costs, and this is based on, again, the reduced millage rate. Administrative costs for COLAs for JWB is about $200,000, and that's based on 3%. New positions will be decreased about 1.5 positions based on the ramp down of some of these other programs, as well as working through, this is FY26. As we get new initiatives and stuff and we need to assign other program oversight to it, we may have to come back and say, hey, we need a need for other positions to be added. So we're being thoughtful about this in the budgeting process. Requests for the capital funding, and this is for those agencies to help them make improvements to their facilities, et cetera. In FY26, about $2.5 million. Last year, we spent almost $4 million on it. Historically, I'm told it's been $1 million to $1.5 million. It kind of varies from year to year. In the out years in 27 and out, now again, we're forecasting, so we're to some degree predicting the future. You're looking at about $1.5 million on average we feel like that we can fund based on the reduced millage rate there. All right, this is kind of where the rubber starts meeting the road. As we consider millage, knowing that millage is a big proponent of the percent that we get from the property assessed values, et cetera, and based on the 5% taxable value inflation that we know of today, we believe that reducing the millage rate is doable, and it really doesn't have a large impact such as the rollback rate, and we'll talk about some of that will have. It still allows us to maintain the minimum assigned fund balance, those reserves that I talked about, at 25%. If we use a rollback rate, we're going to have to eliminate the capital RFA funding. We'll have to eliminate mostly all of the new and expanded programs under the interim strategic plan. There just won't be enough money to fund it. Now, we've got other levers that we can pull, but again, you've got to maintain that balance of, if you're going to grow programs, you got to have the workforce in order to administer those programs, right, and measure outcomes. Reducing the FY 28-30 annualized program investments. Instead of funding it, again, historically for the last strategic plan, we were able to fund it about $4 million. This strategic plan will be cut almost in half. We'll have to reduce that to about $667,000. In FY 26, we'll have to decrease more positions. In 26, we were recommending about 1.5 FTEs. That'll go up to about 2.5. And then we'll reduce new positions as we are thoughtful in forecasting the future, down from 7 to about 2. So it will really be a struggle for us to grow programs and also maintain the existing programs at a rollback rate. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this.
Can I ask a quick
Yes, ma'am.
question? Just being new, you keep talking about the rollback rate versus the reduced millage. Are we operating on a roll? Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, ma'am, I can. And sorry about that. The rollback rate is a rate that would offset the increase or the inflated values from the property assessed values that we're waiting on June the 1st. So this year, we would have an increase of roughly at 5.6%, if that holds, of about $6 million. This basically rolls the rate back where it offsets that $6 million. So you just stay on a flat budget. You don't have anything to cover inflation and those kinds of things with. And I would say if we were still struggling to spend down fund balance and those kinds of things, I'd probably say that's okay to do. But in this case, we've had a trajectory of spending down fund balance. We only have one revenue stream, so we got to be thoughtful about how we use that and how far we reduce it. In this scenario, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. This is our current millage rate that we have, and net ad valorem tax is about $113 million. If we go to the adjusted, that is a decrease of about a little over $3 million. And then if you go to the rollback rate, keeps everything flat, doesn't adjust for inflation, those type of things, you're getting down to over $6 million in a reduction. Questions there? All right. So there's a lot of stuff here, okay? This is on the .82. It's small print, and I apologize. There are hard copies at your desk. Please look at that. So what I wanted to do is, as you're looking at that, if you're so inclined to do so, at your table there, the highlights of this is based on the assessed value that we know today, 5.6%. It's based on those program reductions that Karen and I talked about, and Laura, of $3.8 million. That's embedded into that document that you're looking at. It assumes an FTE reduction of 1.5 positions in FY 26. It allows us to grow 2 positions a year thereafter to about 6 positions. Again, we're looking out for 5 years into the future. Things will change between now and then, and every year the board has, this body has the opportunity to make whatever changes they want to make. The last bullet that I want to note is, and those are my notes I'm reading from, 14% unassigned fund balance by year 30. And I wanted to point that out because today's decisions do affect next year's unassigned fund balance and other things within the budget. In FY 26, it's only about 8%. 16%, 14% in my opinion is high. 8%, a little bit on the higher end. I think it's appropriate and prudent that we have about a 5 to 7% unassigned fund balance. So that's pretty much in line there, and I think under that scenario, that's high in 5 years from now, but for tomorrow, it's probably manageable. It's certainly not out of the realm of, I think, what's prudent and responsible. This is the in between. This is the reduced millage rate, and it's the point. We're talking in thousandths of a percent here. They're not always easy to talk about. It's at the .8029. Okay. And I was going to kind of flow through this just quickly, just to kind of give you some perspective. The net revenue that we get, so we'll just look at the revenue section up here. The net revenue we get, this is the blue column here, is about $113 million, and that's net, okay? If you notice at the top up there, we had a pretty big reduction of about $6 million, and that's to spend down a fund balance. So be aware that there is a reduction in fund balance. Be aware that we have a reduction also in the millage rate that has effect on what our net available money is coming in. And I'm trying to speed up. I know we're almost 3 hours into this presentation. I'm doing the best I can. And still give you the relevant data and so forth. Instead of getting into all the highlighted details, I just wanted to point this out, and I highlighted this for a reason. And that's the spending that we can do under program reductions. And as you can see, in the out years, we're not budgeting for any additional program reductions. Will some of them happen? Likely. Also, the capital RFA, as you can see, we're able to fund some of those, $2.5 million this year and $1.5 million out. If we get into a rollback situation, those will decline or have to be eliminated. So be mindful of that. Here are some key things that we look at when we're running these scenarios, and one of those is a 10% target. And this is for the unassigned fund balance. And this is a number that we try to manage to from the perspective of not having too much money that's not assigned to something, that's not being used for a purpose. The 25% is another target that we manage to, and that's the 25%. Those are the restricted reserves that we talked about. And I'm sorry, this is the 10% is the administrative rate. Down here is the unassigned fund balance. But those are the three criteria that I look at real closely as we're formulating these scenarios. So we want to keep a target in the administrative rate. What is that? That's how much money JWB spends out of the money that it collects. And the target is, per board policy, being less than 10%. The 25% is in board policy that we need to keep that much reserve on hand. And then finally, the unassigned fund balance are the numbers down here that we manage to. We want to keep those around 5%, give or take a couple percent. There are variables down here, and these are the variables that we use in order to build this budget model, okay? And the first one is this will change as we get the property assessed values from Pinellas County. Get those probably June the 1st or so. The next one down is the millage rate that we use to assume to build this scenario on. The next one is the interest rate that we use. Right now, we're forecasting that rates will be about 3.8%. If I can predict that, trust me, I will own my own island in my own country somewhere because I'll know exactly where the markets are headed. COLAs is also in here, and I want to make sure we're clear. The COLAs is 3%. We build it in there. So these are expenses up top, but these are drivers to the budget. We factor in fringe benefit cost and what we think the escalation will be from year to year on that, because as you know, healthcare insurance and other kinds of insurance like that continues to go up. And down here's where we manage our position numbers. So I just thought for the new people and those that have seen this, it's good to know these are the drivers to the plan. This is how the plan predicts and forecasts them in out years. Yes, sir.
Oh, I just want to say, Madam Chair, I have to leave for childcare duty. So Robbie, you're looking for some direction or guidance on where we're
Yes,
at?
sir.
Because you got to, so from me, just me personally, I would be okay with anything other than the rolled back rate. So
Okay.
if you wanted to give them this, from my perspective, just for me, obviously, from my perspective, this would be the scenario that they should plan for. Obviously, understanding we don't set this till September. So a whole ton of stuff is going to change between now and September, but from just initial glance, that would be my preference, would be this one. I'm not ruling out keeping it the same, but I think rolled back is probably a bridge too far for us right now.
Thank you for that.
To be effective.
Thank you for that.
And we might as well not even do a strategic plan if we're going to do the rollback rate. So that's my
agree.
opinion, but yeah, so. Okay, I got to go. Thanks, guys. Great meeting.
All right, thank you.
Now we can give our honest opinion.
So any other questions along that? As Trustee talked about, the rollback rate, the scenarios get tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm glad to review that. I know we're pushing 3 hours into the meeting. There are other opportunities that we can talk about this, certainly one-on-one meetings. I can certainly do that with you all as well. So any preference? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just a few things I want to say. First of all, we just saw in the presentation before that our COLA for salaries is not keeping up already, and we're talking about reducing it again. Retention and recruitment of people is based on salary, and people are looking at jobs based on salaries. money matters, so it's something we need to take in consideration as we're talking about the budget. I realize it's 0.8% reducing it, but at that 0.8%, we're already not meeting where we need to be at according to the study we just had done. Some unknowns that we don't know, right, and we've talked about it, you said it already. We're a special district, we have one stream of income coming in. I'm a special district person, I know very well how this works. Municipalities have 15+ different taxes coming in the front door. They have other places to get money other than their property tax.
Yes,
So
sir.
for them to cut a property tax might not be a big deal, because they can raise other taxes to pick up where the property tax left off at. So that's a difference in special districts that we need to understand, right? The other things are, there's state and federal cuts coming. We know through that are gonna cut programs that we are currently funding today, which means those programs are gonna need some other money to keep them operating, which is what our mission is at JWB, is to operate those programs. This uncertainty in Tallahassee, we talked about that. We don't know where that budget's going, what's gonna happen, where are they gonna cut at? They might cut education, might cut programs that we're funding as well. We don't know those things. And then property values, we know it's gonna be different than what you've suggested already. Commissioner Latvala said they heard 4% today. What is it gonna be over the next 2 years? We're not gonna rebuild next year. That's not gonna happen after those 2 hurricanes. And if we have another hurricane, we're definitely gonna be in a deficit at that point, right? So, we don't know what that collection rate's gonna be over the next couple of years. It could stay solid where it's at. It could drop a little more, maybe drop the year after that. We know properties on the beaches and shore acres are being sold for pennies on the dollar. Those are the high dollar properties that are collecting taxes, that aren't gonna collect taxes. And what if those people don't pay their taxes this year because their property is devastated and they're not gonna rebuild? That's also funds not coming back to us, that we are counting on in this little bit of money. So I'm not opposed to trying to find a way to save taxes. I pay taxes too as a homeowner. But at the same time, I want to make sure we don't underfund ourselves by trying to get a tax cut just to save a dollar when we might cost ourselves more than a dollar that we're saving. We don't know these things, right? And we know there's other programs that we talked about in the last couple board meetings, like autism, that we want to bring on board and start looking at, because we know this is a problem in our county. We know it's a problem for our kids that are in our county. So I just wanted to mention those things, that we don't want to forget about them. I know we've all talked about them over and over, but I think it just needs to be publicly stated that those things are there, they're real, they're gonna happen, and we don't know what those unknowns are.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, we're not voting on this, right? We're just giving suggestions. Okay, so my suggestion would be that you focus on the reduced. Forecasts are full of lots of ifs and buts, right?
They are.
And
They are.
and it really is a risk assessment game. And when it comes to a risk assessment game, it's been my experience that taking a prudent approach is the best option. So it feels like, to me, this is the most prudent, where we could still have the money available to function and provide the services and even some of the things that we're looking to do in the strategic plan move forward, without operating on a fear of those ifs and buts and kind of like over projecting that, right? I'm in agreement with everyone that's spoken about the rollback. I think we can't go there. So that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
I don't,
My turn? Okay, thank you. I really appreciate this. I feel heard from the meeting where I spoke in last September when I voted on this and said I'd like to see us reduce next year. And I think you've done a great job at doing that reduction without going too far into affecting programming. Of course, this may need to be tweaked from here as we receive more information, and that's understandable, but I appreciate what you've done so far. Great job.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am, if that's all right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I too agree with doing the reduced, option. We don't necessarily have to do the full rollback. And just to give you some perspective from our meeting this morning, the county, has about roughly $1 billion more property on the tax rolls this year, which is in line with what it was last year. But we're losing roughly $2 billion so far of property. And part of that is the hurricane, but part of it is from sales. And and people disputing their tax assessments from the hurricane. The bad part is next year will probably be even more rough than this year. And so, that's why a measured approach of cutting a little bit, I think, is good, because this is going to be a couple year issue in Pinellas County, but our residents are hurting, and so I would appreciate doing a small cut, because at the county we're going to try to do a small one if we can. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, but we will see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I too would support somewhere in the middle. I think one of the things we'll be measured against as this conversation continues about special tax districts is how we compare to others. And, we don't control what other taxing agencies do, but a 3% COLA is a luxury compared to some other taxing agencies. And so I think we need to recognize that. I think certainly our funded programs deserve that. But that's not the case in every taxing agency. Where I think we can change the narrative is that most of our programs are preventative, and we're preventing other agencies from having to spend dollars in the future to remedy the ills that we try to correct. And so I think that's a good narrative, but I don't know when people are looking at numbers, those things come into play. So I just think we should be cognizant of that. It doesn't, can't predict the future like everybody else, but we're very different in that regard, and I think we should acknowledge that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Robbie. Great report. Now I think we're to the CEO report, Ms. Houghton.
We did a whole lot of wonderful things in this last month, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I will send you out a mid-month report giving you more details.
That is the best report. You are correct. We're at our informational items. Do we have any public comment before we go to informational?
Yes, we have one card from the Maddie Williams Center. Are they
Okay.
still here? Oh, there you are. Great, thank you.
Well, with your permission, I'll share, Beth. Hi, I'm David Hale. I'm the Executive Director of the Maddie Williams Neighborhood Family Center, and I'm here to share some great news, which is just yesterday, we cut the ribbon on the expansion of the center, doubling our size to serve the community. Thank you. Beth and Karen and Kathleen and Joanne and others were there with us. Beth spoke to a very surprisingly large crowd and talked about the importance of the neighborhood centers. And I really wanted to come here to tell you the impact that it will have on the community because, of course, we couldn't do it without your support. The dream of doubling the size of our building started in 2020 when the increase in demand for our programs happened right around COVID. And it's really continued to grow since then. So serving something like 100 or 120 families a week in our food pantry, we're now doing over 200 a week in that same food pantry. We have just expanded and doubled the size. So talking about budgets and responsibility, what that means is we can receive more food and store more food from more sources. So the funding that we receive from you is really a force multiplier, right? Because we've used it to expand, we can now receive more food and we can serve more families. And in addition, we built a community meeting room. So for the first time, we can receive more of the emergency supplies, the hurricane supplies that we get from St. Pete Free Clinic and others. We had no space for that before. We had to rent storage units on the parking lot or put up tents. So now we actually have a room where we can not only receive it, but distribute it. And we're getting ready to do our very first Hurricane Expo in advance so that we're preparing people before storm season. So I'm here to thank you for making that possible. This is funding that helps us staff, it helps our infrastructure, it gives us the ability to serve more people. And there are many more people needing our help. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions on the informational items before we get to our milestones? Hearing nothing, Mr. Bartley, you have the floor.
Okay, let's see, we have our anniversaries. Hunter Markle, 1 year. Amanda Bear, 3 years. Cindy Matson, 4 years. Joanne De Leonia, 8 years. Lorraine Hayes, 9 years. And Annie Crawford, 11 years.
If anyone would dare, we do have an open agenda at this point.
I just want one quick comment.
Go right
I just
ahead.
want to say thanks to Beth and the staff. You guys have done a wonderful job. Beth, we are going to miss you. You've done a miraculous job. We lived through 2 major issues in our timeline with you, COVID and 2 major hurricanes. And we got through those, and because of your leadership and your staff, it got us through those. Thank you very much.
No other comments? The meeting is adjourned at this time, and thank you guys for your patience today.